Wonderful.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting me be here. I'm getting myself to be host on all of my screens. I just need to find myself one more time. There I am in the sea of people. I'm like, where am I? Where am I on here?
Oh, wow. We have a really nice turnout.
Yeah, we do. It's just great. It was great that I had to work that hard to find my 3 screens. So I appreciate that. So I'm glad that you're all choosing to be here today with me. As you can imagine, the conversation when Christine asked me to do this was in the summer. And so I had an idea of where we were going to go with this talk. And then the past few weeks have happened. And so I'm going to just reframed it a little bit, but not too much has changed. So I'm just glad you're here with me today. I think it's best if we just ask questions at the end. I'm guessing there'll be lots of them. So I just want to put a few thoughts here out of the gate and remind you that abortion is a medical procedure. Pro-life is not a position I recognize. I call that anti-choice, that position. And that women will have abortions even if they're not legal. So these are just some assumptions, or not assumptions, but things that I want to put out there right here at the beginning so that my language makes sense to you as we move through this. I'm going to rely heavily on the Guttmacher Institute because they do really good data and research about all kinds of reproductive issues. Because of what's happening right now, I focused on abortion. So just some numbers about how many abortions occurred. The most recent number they had was for 2017. This was non-hospital abortions. So that number matters later on. And you can see that in Pennsylvania in 2017, 31,260 abortions were provided, though not all that might not have all been Pennsylvania residents, because as we talk about geography, you'll see why that matters. So as I said, this talk is a little different than it was planned when Christine and I talked about doing this. I do have this nice collar. I thought it might be a little too much for today, but I want you to see that someone gifted it to me. And I do have my RBG earrings on. And so for lack of a better word, the specter of her passing, I think, permeates through a lot of this talk about the state of reproductive rights in the US. So what is Roe v. Wade? So, you know, we hear a lot this phrase. I just thought I'd make sure we all understand what that is, because that is something you'll be hearing over and over and over again in the coming weeks before the election. So the big thing you need to I'm just going to call it Roe. The big thing you need to know about Roe is that it made access to abortion without undue burden federal law. So what that does is it means that states then cannot create their own laws about abortion. Now you're going to see it's not that binary and it's not that cut and dry. But in 1973, what this did is change the landscape for women's access to this medical procedure. You'll see what the states have been doing as we talk about this. So I mentioned undue burden. You can like kind of read this if you want, but I wanted you to see where this is from the Center for Reproductive Rights. Undue burden basically means it can't be impossible. Like there can't be a whole bunch of obstacles to women to get an abortion. Now, That's going to mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of people and different judges. So when you hear me talking about undue burden, it's the element of the law that says you must reasonably be able to have access to this procedure. Now, undue burden can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So that's why I kind of put this legalese up there. I am not a lawyer. I want to be very clear. I would love to be a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. So I can talk more like about the structural elements of Roe, but if you want to get into the nitty gritty about the actual ruling, I'm not your girl. So I want to be very upfront about that. So what happens if Roe is overturned? Because that is definitely a question that was being asked come 2016, and as of a few weeks ago, very much asked. And this is a big debate within feminist circles. Like, should we be paying attention? How much energy should we be giving to Roe and maintaining it? Or are there other things that we should be shifting our focus to? My answer is we need to maintain Roe, and you'll see why. So the big reason, here's what happens if Roe goes away. States get to make their own abortion laws. So all 50 states and any territories will be able to make their own decisions and their own laws about how women can access an abortion. This can affect funding, so like who pays for it. You hear a lot that the government is subsidizing Planned Parenthood, and they're not. There's a lot of distortion of language and facts. Shocking. If a woman has Medicaid or Medicare and goes and accesses services at Planned Parenthood, then those elements of insurance pay for procedures. Planned Parenthood, I would have to look again, but the last time I looked is like 3% of what they offer, 3% of what they do is abortion. So, equating Planned Parenthood with like women getting abortions in basements is not correct. States will be able to determine when abortions can be performed. I'm not talking a lot today about like the Susan B. Anthony group that is trying to set a gold standard of how early in a pregnancy a woman would be able to have an abortion. But each state could have its own rule or law about that. If Roe is overturned and states are already doing, so you're going to see like states are already doing this stuff. But in the situation of an abortion, what must be done or told, who gives consent, does a judge need to give a consent for a minor? So all these things are on the table. This is not just like this is not like a either or. Every element of a situation where an abortion is trying to be procured is different. And there's all these elements that have some kind of legal issue involved. So I would like you to leave today knowing that things are already pretty bad. My friend, I don't know if my friend is on this call, but she texted me, she's like, one of my favorite things to do is listen to you tell me how my civil rights are being destroyed. So that's what I'm doing. I mean, it's bad. It's not good, because what has happened is this undue burden has become really murky. And so while Roe is the law of the land, actual access to abortion providers, safe and legal abortion providers, I want to remind you over and over again that women will get abortions, that women will continue to get abortions, and what we are talking about is safe and legal abortions. So getting rid of Roe doesn't make abortion go away. So I beg you to hear that. So undue burden means different things to different people. So this infographic shows that a lot of women have to travel significant distances to get to an abortion provider. Now, if everybody had a car and plenty of money, this would be maybe not be an undue burden. But women who have lower socioeconomic status are often the ones who are trying to access abortion. And in a moment, we'll talk about waiting periods. So if you have to wait 72 hours from the first appointment you've made until you actually get your abortion, if that is 90, 100 miles away, this is a real economic burden for women who are usually seeking out abortion providers. So if you look, let me see if my pencil will cooperate. Right, so like here in the middle, that the middle of the country, so like, and this is women up to 44. I guess I've aged out of this. Like look at that. Look at how much of the country women don't have access or have to really make a significant effort to get access to abortion. So this is what I'm trying to show you, is that it's there, it's the law of the land, but if you can't get it, then what does it matter if everybody's saying it's legal? So I want to talk a little bit about Pennsylvania and the restrictions as of September 1, 2020, and I'm going to talk about, whoa, what just happened? What's going on? Something just made my whole thing go. So anyway, I'm going to talk about Pennsylvania in a moment. Don't you all love this when your professors do this and they can't like do anything and they look really dumb because I just set something on my computer? So Pennsylvania is, I would say, middle of the road state for the issues surrounding abortion. My dog is growling underneath. Appropriate growl, Calvin. So, patient must receive state-directed counseling that includes information designed to discourage the patient from having an abortion, and then wait 24 hours. So Pennsylvania is a 24-hour state. When I started doing women's advocacy as an undergraduate, like many of you, it was a 72-hour state. And so what women would do is they would have to find a way to leave the state and be able to find and go somewhere else to have an abortion that didn't require 72 hours. That's a long time if you have to pay for a hotel room, find somewhere to stay, go back and forth. You know, these aren't people who can just like drop everything to get this medical care. According to the ACA, only women can only get an abortion if their life is in danger, right, rape or incest, or if they pay for extra insurance. You know, so that's, people like, well, at least you can get this. But yeah, isn't that an undue burden? Like if I have health insurance and this is a medical procedure that usually takes 4 minutes and can be done in a doctor's office, you know, this is seeing how women are being punished. To me, this is like women being punished for being women. Again, public employees only if your life is in danger, rape or incest. Now, if you think about the timeline of when you're allowed up until to have an abortion, you can, you know, this isn't like an unlimited amount of time. So if you have to prove to somebody that you've been raped or you are a survivor of incest, that clock is ticking from when you can get to when you might be denied an abortion. The parent of a minor must consent before an abortion is provided. Well, okay, so let's think about that. So we all know that not every home is filled with happy parents and loving parents. And so a child, a minor, if they are pregnant and they need to get an abortion, has to get permission or has to go in front of a judge to get permission. Again, there's a time clock here. And then if you tip over into past 20 weeks, you may not have access to that procedure. That we have 24 weeks. Is anybody else like have a wicked storm suddenly? This is crazy. They're very mad. The wind gods are very angry about this in America. You cannot perform abortion for sex selection. I mean, again, if you're in the reproductive world or you're doing like IVF or something, that might come into play. This is not like something that comes up often. And then the state this is important, state requires clinics to meet unnecessary and burdensome standards. So this is one of the ways that Roe is being disintegrated, is that states are creating all these rules about, and I'm not exaggerating here, about the size of a hallway, for example. So the state will create a law saying, abortion providers have to have hallways that are 12 feet wide instead of 8 feet wide for a gurney, let's say. And so these institutions, they don't have money to redo their whole space. And that's what this means, this unnecessary and burdensome standard to physical plant and staffing. Staffing is privileges. Doctors have privileges to practice in different spaces. And so privilege laws change so that abortion providers aren't going to be able to practice in certain spaces. That's what that means if I'm translating these laws for you. So this is this burden of geography. I call it that, because if we're talking about an undue burden, the burden of geography here. So in 2014, there were 3 states where there was only one place to access a legal abortion: Mississippi, Missouri, Wyoming. Wyoming is not a small state. There were 5 in Montana. So if you don't think this is political, now look at the list, right? So I just said PA's kind of middle of the road, right? Pennsylvania had 20 in 2014. California had 152, New York State had 95, and the DC area had 5. So you can see how geography is part of this conversation. You can, so what you can say then is, well, they can get an abortion. Yeah, but they're gonna have to find some way to get, it's not accessible. It's fine if there's a place to get it, but if the women who need it cannot access it, that is the undue burden. But many circuit judges don't agree with that. And so that's why Roe's like kind of holding everything together. And we'll talk a sec what will happen if it falls. So I really like this quote by Stephanie Totti, because I am a big talker about theory and practice. My students will tell you that. So policies like these, like I just talked about, contribute to a real gap between the rights that women have in theory. So in theory, women have the right to abortion on paper, and the rights that women are actually able to exercise in practice. In practice, women do not have access to abortion, specifically poor women. Those kinds of restrictive policies have a hugely disproportionate impact on poor women, immigrant women, women of color, women in rural areas. And so there's all these obstacles that are in the way of their opportunity to get an abortion. Let me see what time it is. I'm not gonna, so I was gonna take us to the chart. So the Guttmacher has charts of all these things. Counseling and waiting periods, you can see the vast difference. Counseling is what counseling is required. So some states require the patient to be given documents, be required to undergo like a therapy session. All of these assume and undermine women's agency as if they hadn't already thought about all these things. Now, if a woman wanted those things and they were just available, that makes perfect sense to me. However, if these are requirements, and that's what I'm talking about, these are requirements for women to have a medical procedure, that's a problem for women. And again, I remind you, this is a procedure only done on women. So there's gonna be some element of gender and gender inequity here. Specious science that is forced on women. Women are often told that having an abortion some states require women to be told that abortion causes an increased risk of breast cancer, that women who have an abortion have more significant mental health issues because of having an abortion, things that are not founded in science. And I could take us to that chart, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I want you to know it exists. And after the talk, I'll happily share the link with you. But this shows you some of the states that require people to be told I guess we don't like science anymore, but like things that are not scientifically valid. So ultrasound policies, again, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, though I was planning on it, because I want you to just know that there are several states that require a woman to have an ultrasound before she is granted an abortion. Some states require the woman to look at the screen, and this chart tells you who's required to look at the screen, who is allowed to, what states allow women to look away. Now, Pennsylvania doesn't require an ultrasound, a woman to undergo an ultrasound. But even the ultrasound, like that can be very unsettling and violating if you are one of the people maybe that has survived rape or incest, right? Now you're being forced to undergo an ultrasound to have this procedure that you are seeking out. So there are all these different policies that all the states have. But as long as the women in the state can get an abortion, Roe is being followed. So it kind of seems like you're probably thinking, well then, all right, well, what does it matter? So, is Roe v. Wade important? Ask yourself what Mitch McConnell thinks about this question. And if you are watching what is going on in this country, a small slice of it thinks Roe v. Wade might be the most important thing in this country. And getting rid of it is the sole basis of what we are watching right now. And it shows our structural issues that that RBG, that one person was the linchpin. One person should not be the linchpin for something like this. The reason this new nominee is so popular is because she has said she does not agree with precedent. That is the standard by which people have been chosen. Because if the precedent is Roe v. Wade, you don't agree with precedent, that means you will be fine eradicating Roe v. Wade. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't think Roe v. Wade's that important anymore, Mitch McConnell would totally disagree with you. And as you watch the landscape of what's happening. So the anti-choice movement has been waiting for this moment. So I would argue that for decades, these little wins, these like little wins in the circuits, the federal circuits about practicing privileges, about hallway size. Again, I'm not making this up. I'm not harping on hallway sizes. This is an actual thing. These like little wins have buoyed the anti-choice movement for decades. And where we are standing right now is the last thing. Roe is the last thing that they need to fall. Because when or if, depending on how pessimistic you are, Roe is erased, there will no longer be that federal law, and states will no longer have to do these cartwheels and, you know, all these things that they're trying to do to ensure that women do not have access to abortion. And the anti-choice movement has had momentum, not because of numbers, but because of political clout, I would argue the only reason Donald Trump is president is because he has pandered to the anti-choice movement, even though I don't think for a lick he actually believes in it. And I know this sounds, I mean, I really do think that the next few weeks is where these gates open for the eradication of legal and safe abortion, or that one last element that staves off complete eradication of it. Not complete, because some states will let me say this, some states are going to have abortion because some states will legalize it, but it will be erratic. It just won't be a federal law. So, you know, what do? We can support Planned Parenthood. I talked about that before. Poor, you know, women of lower socioeconomic status rely on Planned Parenthood. College students rely on Planned Parenthood. I went to Planned Parenthood for my health care and reproductive needs as an undergrad. You know, I didn't even know what Planned Parenthood was. I just know it's where everybody went to get their questions answered and to make sure they were healthy. There is a hashtag that Lindy West started, Shout Your Abortion. Not everybody has the privilege that they can talk openly about their abortion. But if you look at that hashtag, it is a lot of women who talk about their abortion to try to destigmatize. You know, abortion isn't something to be ashamed of. It's not something it's something that people around you have had, whether they tell you or not. 1 in 4 women in America, according to the Guttmacher Institute, have had an abortion. It's a procedure. So, you know, you could go and look at some of those stories and try, if you feel comfortable talking about it. And just vote. I mean, if you are at this talk and you are not registered to vote, I do not know what you are doing here. And I would say to you, you should click leave right now, because nothing I have to say matters more than you voting in a few weeks. I'm assuming that this is an issue that you care about. Either way, right? Maybe you do not agree with a single word I said, but I still hope you vote, because this is a thing and that matters about the will of the land. I believe that is the end of my very depressing talk. So I'm going to stop my screen share. And Christine, would you like call on folks if they raise their hand? Could you kind of do that? That's awesome. Thank you. I hear my little person, by the way.
Sure.
So if a 9-year-old starts to like Zoom bomb behind me, that's why. Okay.
And if anyone has a question, you can unmute. I think you can raise your hand, or you could put it in the chat.
I hear her. There are about 100 things I did not talk about in this talk. So if you want to bring something up that we didn't talk about, I probably know enough to at least answer a little bit. I see
Grace, I see your hand. Oh, you're muted.
Hi, Dr. Clemens. It's so good to see you. I am on a student political leadership panel discussion coming up in a few weeks. And the whole premise is that the one leader from each political club, for the most part, on campus is all going to be on a Zoom call with Dr. Garrison from the Criminal Justice Department.
I already told all 4 of my classes about it.
Yes. Okay. So you know.
I love that. I love what that group has put together.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. And I'm sure this is going to come up, especially with the Supreme Court nominee. So I was wondering if you had any advice as to how I could best argue the importance of 1, safe and legal abortion access, and 2, nominating a Supreme Court justice this close to an election.
So if I can start with the second, if you have been watching the backbends people have done to undo the exact same thing they said when Merrick Garland was nominated, it is astounding. I just send Senator Pat Toomey his exact words every day and say, this is exactly what you said. And you said it was a problem 7 months out, and we are 7 weeks out. So please explain to me why the thing you said was utmost moral importance now no longer a matter. And the answer to that, by the way, is this. Exactly what we just talked about. Don't let anybody fool you for a moment that that is why this is happening. I would love to help you make the argument for safe and legal abortion, but I mean, at this point, the fact that women don't have access to this still, and that we're still having this argument, says to me that I'm unsure of what argument would even work or matter anymore. Mm-hmm. Women's agency over their own bodies seems like a really valid argument to me. Mm-hmm. But it gets, everything gets wrapped up in layers of different ideologies and beliefs, and those things matter too. This is why I don't say the pro-life, I don't call the group pro-life, because you can't be pro-life just when it's a zygote. Right. If you want to be pro-life, you're pro-life for the entire life. You don't fight against healthcare for all. And usually, maybe not like individually, but often structurally and ideologically, those fights go together. So it is easy for me to look around and say, well, you care about cells. Right. And eventually those cells are a baby. But it's hard. I wish I had something better for you, Grace. I mean, you could ultimately argue, like what I just said, right, that Roe matters because it is a federal law that has been the federal law of the land since 1973. I said my whole talk is just going to be me yelling. Here I'm yelling. It's just me yelling. It's the law. And I know some laws are reprehensible, and we go back and look at them and be like, that was bad. That was on the wrong side of history. I don't think this is a law that would do that. We haven't even talked about the global implications of us exporting our abortion laws and rigid beliefs to the rest of the world. That's a whole other talk. But it doesn't feel like a dialogue anymore. Yeah. And that's what's frustrating about it. Because I get a lot of the conversation around the topic. But ultimately, if a woman needs this, she needs this. And the attitude that women are just flippantly having abortions as healthcare or as a as a birth control is ludicrous. It's not. It's a medical procedure. It's a medical procedure. Mm-hmm. I wish I could help you make the argument, but I don't think any of us have. I don't think any of us have done a good job at making the argument, because it gets really emotional really fast. So be prepared. It gets really emotional really fast.
Thank you.
If I offered any help, you're welcome.
I see Andrea Buno has a question.
Andrea, hey.
Hi.
Thank you for joining.
Yes. Thanks for reminding me about this.
Andrea loves hearing me yell about it.
So I got into a heated conversation with my father on this exact topic, and which I said, I feel like this is just a stepping stone to other women's rights being revoked. Do you also feel the same way?
Well, to me, I see Roe as like this pinnacle of women's rights. I actually can't believe Roe became the law of the land in 1973. When you look back historically, it's kind of shocking. I think that anything that devalues women's agency over their own choices and bodies is going to chip away at rights that women have. Because men can't have abortion. I have a friend, he's a man, he's like, if men needed abortions, you could get one at 7-Eleven. And he, you know, I can't argue with him. Like, there is some element here of restricting women's bodies. And I think any argument that willfully ignores that is problematic. It just is. It doesn't hold up, because yeah, exactly. That's a great essay, right? If men can menstruate. And and Maya has invoked Gloria Steinem, who had an illegal abortion and wrote very beautifully about it, about how her life would have been completely different if she would have not been able to get that illegal abortion. Now, thank God she was safe. This is not always the case. So I'm glad that you brought her up. I think that's happening every minute, Andrea. It's hard not to feel bereft. I said to somebody today, I'm like, I keep thinking like my sadness can't get any lower, and now it's like half pipe level. Like it's just like, it just keeps going. Like I just find new layers of depth of things that I can be sad about. And when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, sad. It shouldn't come down to one person, but it did. And now that I will be honest, I don't know that there's much that can be done in the coming weeks. So all of you who are significantly younger than I am, now need to think about how you reframe your work for the next decades. I'm going to be an old lady, right? And this is the other thing I tell people when I talk about this. I'm a rich white lady. My kid needs an abortion and it's illegal. I'll be able to get her one, right? So that's privilege in and of itself. I will be able to do that because I have money and access, even if it's illegal. So when if this is made illegal, it is going to fall on the backs of poor women, because privileged women will probably still be able to find ways to get this procedure.
And from my understanding as well, it's not just abortions. It's if you miscarry, you are not even allowed to get like a D&C at the hospital type of situation.
So I did not go down this path because it sounds too ridiculous to be true. Mike Pence's state, when he was there, they were trying to enact a fetal burial charge. You know, I've written about this. I've had miscarriages. I've had lots of trouble being pregnant. This is not me not loving children. This is me not wanting people to carry cells that they don't want. And, you know, I wrote about imagining the pile of ash from my DNC. And, you know, it's like 4 ashes. And it was me really playing with that idea. The idea that a woman would have to pay to have these remains, using their word, buried. And IVF, you know, but IVF and women with embryos, that's something that is gonna become more problematic, I think, if the court changes. So this is not just one issue. I just chose abortion, but this is not one issue. This is I used to use the word corona, but I'll say constellation, right? This is a constellation of issues, and they all circle back to women and their agency over their own bodies and their own choices. All of them. Do I think it's going to become like The Handmaid's Tale? No. But when people use the argument to me, well, abortion shouldn't be legal because other women can't get pregnant, I'm like, so? What does that have to do with anything? that is The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, that's the whole point of the book. So that we're talking about like structural issues here of denying women agency over their own bodies. Is that a wave, Maya?
Oh, I thought that Maya was raising her hand.
I thought so too. Is Maya raising Maya's hand? Yes? No? Maybe? Oh, Grace, what were you doing? You were crossing your
fingers that we won't end up like Handmaid's Tale.
I don't think, I mean, I know, and it's very visually stunning, and it's, yeah, I don't know.
Maya and I would totally be the women in the grocery store that are like, girl.
I'm not trying to be macabre. I would be the woman who's hanging on the side of the wall day 2 because I wouldn't know how to keep my mouth shut. Anyway, yeah, it's a very instructive show. Does anybody else have any? I mean, I know it's almost 3:45, but is there anybody else that has a question?
I don't see any other hands popping up. I actually have a question, Colleen.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about like if it does get overturned and it goes back to the states to be able to make their own laws. So this is a question / statement, I guess, because then I'm assuming if that happens, that when new governors or legislators are voted in, that they can change it. It would change.
It could be erratic. Yeah, I think, that's the word erratic is what comes to my mind. It could be, it's already erratic in the restrictions and rules, but the concept of access is not erratic. But it will be. People make these promises. People get elected on the promise of that. So, I mean, they're very open up and out front and open about the erratic nature. And what's going to happen is women who have the access are going to cross state lines, and women who don't are going to have unsafe procedures and die. Not everybody dies. I don't want to seem hyperbolic. A lot of the attention that came to this, and I wasn't going to show this image, and I won't, when Ms. published a picture of a woman who had an illegal abortion and died, and they published that photo, and that got a lot of attention about the issue of, again, I will remind you, women have always had abortions. They will continue to have abortions, and what Roe does is ensure that it is legal and safe. So if there's one thing you leave with, and Grace, that actually would be helpful, right? Like if somebody starts to make that argument, Roe makes it legal and safe. And then there's going to be like false equivalencies about drugs or something else like that, and whatever. If you can just get people to remember, Roe going away doesn't make abortion go away. It's always so true.
Maybe Jeff Bezos will fund all the Planned Parenthood.
Oh. I mean, maybe we could just get better access to contraception, and then we wouldn't maybe always have to worry about this. Or maybe things like Plan B and other non-surgical ways to have an abortion would become accessible and available, right? Like the argument keeps changing. And so
exactly.
There are all these ways, and it's like whack-a-mole, right? Like every single thing, it's like, nope, can't have that. Nope, can't have that. Nope, can't have that. Oh, sweetie, you do not have any idea what you actually want. Let me give you counseling with specious science. Let me make you look at this thing. Now you got to look at the camera, or I'm not going to give you your procedure that you just drove 200 miles to get. Like, this is the perfect example of this kind of structural problem. When I was lest you think that there is not misogyny in the healthcare system, I had to do, I had to do a lot to have that creature that just Zoom bombed. And I needed a lot of really expensive medicine. And when I called, and because my medicine was not covered, the next question I asked was, is Viagra covered? And they told me yes. So lest you think that our healthcare system does not, and also, by the way, that was fertility medicine. That's me trying to get pregnant. That's me trying to do the thing everybody wants me to do. Was not supported by our health insurance, but Viagra was. Like, and I was like, you gotta be kidding. So it's a structural problem. Individuals can have sane and decent conversations about this, but the moment it starts to become like bigger, it's so inflammatory. It's hard. It's hard because there's so much at stake in the minds of both sides if we're talking about it as a binary.
There's a couple new questions in the chat. So why is Plan B so expensive?
See comment above about structural inequities in healthcare, and because people who make decisions, lawmakers and insurance companies, don't want you to have access to Plan B. And also, you should be able to go into any pharmacy and ask for Plan B, and they should have it. That is not the case. And people who are pharmacists can deny giving it to you. So, again, you don't know what's best for you.
Right.
I know what's best for you.
Our health center actually had a grant a couple years ago for Plan B. And unfortunately, it ran out. And I'm not sure, I think the health center is a little busy these days, but maybe when we get back to not being in a global pandemic, I'm not sure if that's funding that's still available or where that funding came from. I just remember hearing about that as one of their services that they were offering.
Yeah, it's great.
And there's another question, why do we never learn about it in school or anything?
Well, I just talked about this with one of my classes. I can't remember. I had everybody reflect on the sex ed they had. And, what you learn is sex is bad. Don't do it. No conversation about pleasure. Conversations about safety in the sense of you're going to get a disease or you're going to get pregnant. Everything is so, and again, these are state mandates. That's another talk, right? But states mandate that curriculum. So every state is different. So some states require abstinence-only education. So if your kid is in school, they will be only taught about abstinence. So if you're only taught about abstinence as your approach to sex, you're not going to talk about abortion for sure. But even in states that abstinence only, I taught high school. You get a phone call the moment you say one word about anything. And listen, I would be the same, right? If my kid came home and was like, abortion is murder, I'd be calling the school too. So I think it's a hot potato that wise secondary teachers, and I would lump myself in that, I think, when I taught high school, would just not even try for their own protection. Emma, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, so let me preface this. Can you guys hear me?
Of course.
Okay, sometimes my mic doesn't work. But anyways, let me preface this by saying, I've talked to a good amount of people about, Roe v. Wade, and even people who, go to college. Unless they really care about this sort of thing, they don't really know what Roe v. Wade is, which, surprised me because, to me, it's, such a fundamental thing. And I've talked to you about how some people believe if Roe v. Wade is overturned, there's going to be some kind of huge movement about women's rights and all that. But do you think if it was overturned, people would be more aware of what it did? Do you think people are taking for granted what it provides?
That's interesting. So it's part of the ecosystem, and so people don't really think about the importance of that law. Gosh, it's hard for me to imagine that, but I think you're probably right that a lot of folks don't make that connection unless you're paying good, close attention to it and thinking about it. I think you're probably right. I think a lot of folks, I think there are a lot of issues that people wouldn't be able to point to the Supreme Court law that gives them that right. To me, it just seems like Roe is constantly to me, it seems like this is constantly being talked about. But that might just be because, that I'm politically minded. And as for the other thing that we've talked about, these folks who are like, well, just let it collapse and then there'll be a revolution and women will have these rights. I'm like, yeah, but in the meantime, first of all, that'd be nice. Probably not going to happen. Second of all, you're denying the material consequences to all the women who will not be able to get an abortion. So I know that desire for revolution can be strong, but I always tend toward the reformist, where it's like, well, we already have this law. Why don't we just make sure it stays the law instead of tearing things down to build them up? Because in the time it takes to build them back up, a lot of women are going to be affected. Bye, Maya. Kelly.
Hi, Dr. Clemens.
Hi.
So I've just been kind of sitting here thinking of questions to ask, and one of the biggest things, this is kind of more of a individual question for me, but I paired the WGS minor with my major in English and paralegal studies, and I actually just took the LSAT Saturday morning.
I'm so jealous.
I am so scared, but obviously my hope is to attend law school. And one of the biggest reasons that I want to go is for the purpose of being passionate about women's health, specifically the reproductive health and the lack of it. And one of the things that I think that I'm struggling with is that I want to put in my personal statement and in my applications to the schools I'm looking at, I want to make it clear why I am passionate about the law, and sometimes in the ways that it fails. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of in this mid space of am I I'm here because I have this passion, but if I send in this kind of application, or if I add in these details in my personal statement, are people who read it who could ultimately, declare my
yeah.
Is that going to be something that is too political?
So and my answer sometimes is, if they don't want you for who you are, you don't want to be there. However, you want to be a lawyer, and they are the gatekeepers.
Yes.
I think there are ways to, and we can look at your statements together sometime. I think there are ways to put forth that passion without being so overt that if it goes against the ideology of the person reading your statement, aren't going to discount you.
Right. And I don't want my first sentence to be just straight up these are my views, take it or leave it. I mean, that's kind of the person I am, but I'm not going to start my
No, but you'll know how to finesse. And I think it's brilliant what you've done. And I have looked at the paralegal program, because I think I'm going to try to do it by the time I retire.
Fantastic.
I don't know if any of my friends are on this call, but they get mad at me whenever I say this. But if I could find a part-time law school, I would go to law school in a heartbeat. So yes. I'm thrilled that is a path that you want to take.
Thank you.
Because I think other than being in a classroom, being in anything having to do with law is a great place to create change.
Thank you. I'm very nervous, but I am thankful.
You know what? I did not, and I was going to be a professor. There was no way I was going to be anything but a teacher. But now I look back and I'm like, I was convinced I couldn't have gone to law school. Why not? I don't get in your own way.
Yeah.
Again, I'm very happy with where I am, and it is where I'm supposed to be. But now I'm like, God, when I retire, I want to do something. I want to do something different. Mm-hmm. So even if you don't do something specifically, though there'll be plenty to do, but all facets of law are going to have that element of advocacy for women.
Thank you. I'm sitting here, in this mid area of do I get my point across, or is that what's crossing the line? So
yeah. Well, I never applied to law school, but I'm happy to look at it sometime.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pretty good. I wasn't good today, but I'm pretty good at saying really bold things without shutting people down. I wasn't good at that today, but I can be good at it.
Good. Okay. I'm going to work on that.
Anybody else, Christine?
It looks like Eric unmuted.
I just want to say, yeah, this is a really informative talk. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for being here, Eric.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm
So-
glad you were here. And I hope you're well. It's so nice. I'm like, oh, I get to see somebody in Lytle Hall. I hope you're good.
It's a ghost town. It's a ghost town in here.
Are you there?
I'm actually, yeah, I'm in Lytle.
I thought maybe. Oh, is it weird? Do you smell anything coming from my office? I'm sorry if you do. I
Oh,
apologize.
no, the only smells come from my office when I heat up lunch, and so
Yeah, but no one can smell it, so it's fine.
yeah, but no one's here to smell it. Yeah, except for the 3 people that are usually here anyway. So.
Well, I'm grateful that you took, because I know you don't. It's hard for you to find an hour to do something, so I appreciate that you were here.
Yeah. So. And yeah, I didn't feel shut down at all. So.
Good.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I admit I'm a pro-lifer. I know you don't like that term, but I just wanted to understand the pro-choice viewpoint.
Good.
Because
I love that you did that.
yeah, because I don't want, if I'm to debate anyone or anything like that or discuss anything, I don't want to misunderstand your position. So,
Great.
yeah. So thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Eric.
It was.
Take care of Lytle for us.
What?
Take care of Lytle for us.
Yeah, I'm trying my best. So thanks.
Bye. I have to go. Oh, bye, Lori. Thank you.
Bye, Lori.
And Andrea, I think that's a reasonable.
Yeah, it looks like it's 4 o'clock. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you so much, Colleen Clemens, for sharing your time and your wisdom and your expertise. And I really appreciate it that you're a part of the Equality Talk.
And I appreciate that you were part of Kutztown, Christine Price.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
And there were a few people here maybe that were for the honors program. So if you were here for that, just let me know. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I actually was here. I'm sorry. I actually was here for the honors program.